What victim ended up being the bad guy after more information came out? U/Aversa responded. Anna Julia Quezada. She was dating a divorced man who had an 8-year-old son. One day, the kid goes missing and the news started interviewing the parents. She would always stand next to the dad crying and begging the kidnapper that, if they're watching, to please give back the kid. I remember this very vividly watching the news. Turns out, there was no kidnapping. She'd killed the kid the very first day of his disappearance and played her part around her boyfriend and the news. People believe she did it out of jealousy and in hopes of convincing her boyfriend to move to her country to get over his kid. Her 4-year-old daughter had also died in 1996 in some strange circumstances. U/Crotchmacawsome responded. Lan and Angela Diaz. The story appeared on 60 Minutes. In short, Lan, who was a deputy U.S. Marshal, claimed that his ex Michelle Hadley was posting rape fantasy adverts on Craigslist in an attempt to get Angela raped. Eventually, Michelle ended up arrested and sat in jail for 88 days as police investigated the matter. It was during that investigation that they realized things didn't add up. It was all a ploy to frame Michelle as part of a twisted plot to get her to walk away from a condo she had purchased with Lan. At first it was assumed or implied Angela alone was responsible and she pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, 5 years later Lan was found guilty for his participation in the plot and sentenced to 10 years in prison. U/Lemonilol responded. Recently there was this dude in a town in Ontario who filed assault charges on his neighbor for spraying him with a water gun. Her story comes out first to the media, saying how she can't return to work as school support staff until the charges are sorted out, and gives a story about how she was just having a fun water gun fight with the neighbor kids and accidentally sprayed the neighbor while he was mowing his lawn. Week later, his story gets published in the paper. He's repeatedly received targeted harassment for this neighbor and others. He says likely because he's the one black guy on the street of a small town, in an interracial marriage, and releases his security camera footage of him just casually cutting his lawn, with the other neighbor actively telling the kid to bring her the water gun while she's standing behind him, then sprays him directly with it. And the camera also captures the audio of the aftermath where some racial slurs are dropped, also a recurring thing. What's also funny is that the neighbor claimed that there was some language barrier misunderstanding between them. The guy is straight up Canadian and speaks clearer than most people. U/Breaklance responded. In 1864 a train pulled into London carrying a blooded unconscious man, Franz Muller. Police were alerted and when the man came to Muller told them as they were riding 2 men approached him and tried to rob him. However Mr. Muller fought back, was shot, and then left behind as the robbers jumped off the train. What actually happened was Franz Muller attacked a Mr. Thomas Briggs, a 69-year-old banker, and robbed him of his gold chain and pocket watch. Later in the day Mr. Briggs would be found unconscious lying on the tracks because Muller shot him and threw Briggs off the train. Briggs would soon pass away from his injuries. Police were super suspicious and then a pawn shop owner came forward identifying Muller as selling him Briggs' gold chain. London police issued a warrant, however Muller had already fled the hospital and boarded a sail ship for New York. Scotland Yard inspectors took a steamship to NY beating Muller by weeks. They and an entire crowd of people were waiting at the docks when Muller arrived. And that's the story of the first murder on a train. There's a cool book about it, Mr. Briggs' Hat. U/Deleted responded. In 1961, Captain Julian Harvey was found drifting at sea in a lifeboat with the lifeless body of a little girl by the name of Renée Duperrault. When he was rescued, he explained that he had been hired by the girl's family to sail them around the Florida Keys for vacation in a ketch called the Bluebelle. He went on to explain that, the previous evening, a strong wind caused the main mast to snap and pierce the hull, causing the ship to sink. Worst still, a fire broke out, separating him from the family and the only other crew member, his own wife. He got into the lifeboat hoping to swing behind and hopefully get through the cabin from behind, but the ship had sunk rapidly and the other person he was able to recover was the already dead Renée. Truly a tragic story. That was, until, 3.5 days later Terry Jo Duperrault, the other daughter of the Duperrault family, was found drifting at sea in a small cork dinghy. She was dehydrated, starving, sunburned like hell, but alive. When she was healthy enough to make a statement, the story she told was very different from Harvey's. She woke up to find her brother and her mother already dead, and when Captain Harvey saw her, shouted at her to go back to her cabin. She did so, cowering under the covers, and says that Harvey was standing at the door of her cabin. She thinks that maybe he was holding his brother's rifle, but she's not completely sure. He eventually left and, when the water started to fill her room, she went up on deck. Harvey got her help to undo the life raft, however, When the rope slipped through her fingers, he dove into the water after it, leaving her on the sinking vessel. She then remembered the cork dinghy and crawled into it. As you can see, her account is very different from Harvey's and, most notable, there never was a fire. U/Hosflex responded. Corey Harris. He's the guy who went viral earlier this year for showing up at a Zoom court hearing driving while on suspended license. He spent 2 days in jail. Then it was reported that Harris should have had his license reinstated 2 years prior. Harris' attorney sets up interviews with local TV stations stating his innocence. Good Morning America does a piece on Harris and lectures the viewer to not judge a book by its cover. Harris goes back to court, the judge does his homework, and discovers Harris has never had a license in Michigan or any other state, yet has been to Secretary of State office multiple times to renew his ID. The opportunity was there for him to get a license, he chose not to. He goes viral again, but because he lied and embarrassed so many people along the way. U/Lila Fowler 88 responded. Dave Krupa had been dating casually after his 12-year relationship ended and ended up meeting a woman named Carrie Farver. They hit it off instantly and spent a lot of time together over the next few weeks. This was until Carrie texted Dave at work and asked if they could move in together. This was a shock to Dave and he said no. Carrie then sent a super nasty response and basically told him to fuck off. Dave then started getting bombarded with texts and emails from Carrie. The harassment, already relentless and almost daily, started to expand to include other people in Dave's life, like his recent ex, girlfriend Liz Golia. Liz became a constant target of Carrie's stalking and harassment. Things escalated. At one point Liz's house burned down. I suggest looking up this case for the full details because there's so much more to this story. As it turned out, Liz had killed Carrie ostensibly out of jealousy of Carrie's quickly growing relationship with Dave. Liz then began impersonating Carrie and sending messages pretending to be Carrie. That's right, Liz was the one behind all those messages. The whole story is absolutely wild. I suggest checking out the book A Tangled Web by Leslie Rule for the full story. It's absolutely nuts. U/Redman 9000 responded. Brittany Norwood, a former soccer star that worked at a Lululemon athletic clothing store in an upscale wealthy neighborhood. She had worked the night shift with her manager and both were the victim of a brutal robbery murder. A co-worker arrived at the Lululemon store the next morning, discovered the scene and contacted the police. The manager, Jana Murray, was brutally murdered and stabbed over 60+ times. Norwood suffered minimal injuries, her pants ripped and she was tied up. Norwood claimed an African-American man first killed Murray, then approached Norwood, ripped her pants apart and raped her. The police initially believed Norwood's story and sent her home. During the investigation, the police came across text messages of manager Jana Murray discovering Norwood had been stealing merchandise and she was going to confront her about the theft, then fire her. The police soon made Norwood a suspect, especially after discovering Murray's car, with Norwood's blood inside, was parked 3 blocks away from the store. Norwood claimed the robber told her to move the car, then walk back to the store, or they will kill her. The police believed this was absurd. She would be allowed to leave, then return after being allowed to leave. She was arrested, charged with murder, convicted and sentenced to life without parole. It was later revealed at her trial the entire murder was overheard by several people who did not intervene. An Apple Store employee overheard women fighting and assumed it was just drama. U/Victoriajuras responded. It's local, Greece, but it has not precedence so far. A woman by the name Rula Pispirigu is accused of killing all of her 3 children, out of spite and jealously for her husband. They had an on and off relationship. She became pregnant, they got married. She gave birth to 3 girls. The second daughter was in the early stages of leukemia, but the doctors considered it completely viable. She died unexpectedly and without any cause related to her condition. At some point, in the same timeline, the first daughter was also admitted at the hospital. 3 years later, the third daughter dies in her crib. SIDS is considered the cause of death. Special tests for hereditary diseases come back negative. The only remaining child, the first Dafa, ends up in the hospital once again. While being treated, she goes into some type of a shock. They revive her after trying for 50 minutes. She comes back, tetraplegic. You can all imagine how everyone was viewing her. The poor woman, with the unfaithful husband that lost 2 children and her last one, was left with special needs. That is until her daughter dies while being at the hospital. Now all 3 children are gone. The prosecutor gets involved and everything starts to roll out. How conveniently, a child was either admitted to the hospital or died, because the husband had left the house or moved out. Currently, she is incarcerated with a lifetime sentence, convicted of killing her 3 children. U/existing_hatter 546 responded. Carla Leanne Homolka, the Barbie in the Barbie and Ken killers. She was thought of as the victim of Paul Bernardo's abuse, being forced into participating in his rapes and murders. This included the one where Paul raped and accidentally murdered her younger sister, Tammy Homolka. She went to the police to report Paul after a particularly bad beating from him that left her in hospital. She was given a plea deal and her lawyer covered up the tape recordings that showed her willingly participating in the rapes and murders. Once this information was let out, it was too late. The plea deal was made, Paul was arrested and is still in prison, and she got out and now is working around children in a school. I fucking hate that nasty bitch. She was abused by him. Yeah, but it disgusts me that she willingly participated in the murders and rapes. Oh, and she married the brother of the lawyer who represented her. She's able to live a normal life, whereas the 3 teenagers she helped kill never got to start theirs. U/capital intention 369 responded. Diane Downs. Short story of it is that she showed up at a hospital claiming a strange man had accosted her and her 3 children, tried to carjack her, then started shooting. One of her daughters was already deceased, her other daughter had a stroke, and her son was injured so severely that he was left paralyzed from the waist down. Well, turns out what actually happened was that Diane had been involved with a guy at her work. The man was married, but had an affair with her. He had wanted just a casual fling and ended up reconciling with his wife, but Diane had become obsessed with him and wanted more. He had been pretty open vocal about not wanting children, so Diane tried to take care of the problem by killing her kids, thus, in her mind, getting rid of any obstacle to them having a relationship. U/Belgand responded. Helena Taylor when she was replaced on Bayonetta 3. She was the original voice actress for Bayonetta in the first 2 games. About 2 years ago she came out with an angry statement that she had been offered what sounded like a rather low amount of money for the 3rd game, then replaced by Jennifer Hale. The entire vibe was that it was an intentional lowball to get rid of her. She insisted that fans should boycott the game. You saw the response immediately on Reddit. People wanted to jump to her defense and criticized Platinum Games. Slowly the rest of the story began to come out. She was apparently demanding a ridiculous fee, plus royalties. She had lied or at the very least deliberately misrepresented the deal previously. She increasingly came off as a little unhinged and vindictive, with an inflated sense that she was responsible for the success of the games and irreplaceable. For several days it seemed like a new detail was coming out every day that kept making her look worse and worse. It was particularly interesting to see this happen in such a short period of time. To watch the public opinion shift as more information was revealed with each subsequent day. It really showed the importance of getting all the facts, hearing from multiple sides, and not immediately falling for ragebait internet drama in fan culture. U/Snow776 responded. LaDonna Humphrey, a true crime podcaster, foster mother of 5, multiple charities in her name with a focus on cold cases where only the victim's body was found, and a director of a sober living facility. Highly recommend. Who's afraid of LaDonna Humphrey, as this is tip of the iceberg. Turns out, she was harassing her co-hosts on a podcast through catfish accounts for content. It was only when she took a screenshot and she was still logged in as one of the harassing accounts, sending it to her co-host, that things started to unravel. She somehow gained police access to case files of Melissa Witt masquerading as a PL and uploaded her body being found to YouTube. She accused a completely innocent bystander of her murder on her podcast. The charities. Yeah, she was using them as her personal piggy bank. Sober living facility, it's run as a cult with blatant financial fraud, overcrowding, slave labor, stealing funds meant for the business. Oh, those fosters. One's a convicted sex offender who is also the handyman for a women's sober living facility. U/Birchpiece91 responded. The Roxanne Powlett Punchgate incident on Celebrity Big Brother. She accused another housemate, Ryan Thomas, of punching her and spent the next couple of days convincing the other participants that this occurred and generally turning the house against him. Don't get me wrong, it was immediately evident to the audience watching at home that she was a lying POS. But with the housemates, they initially believed her and confronted Ryan and made his time at the house generally unpleasant. All the while, Ryan was in an isolated environment, not knowing what his family, the general public, were thinking back home. It was actually awful that the producers let it play off for so long. Anywho, next eviction vote comes and the housemates could hear the general public outside chanting Ryan's name and jeering Roxanne. You could see the penny drop for all of the other housemates. Roxanne soon left of her own accord in disgrace and tried to play the victim card, until it turned out that she had pulled this crap on multiple occasions in private settings with colleagues, etc. Her career is now absolutely well and truly in the toilet. Oh, and Ryan ending up winning the competition. Honestly, watch a video on it. Not usually a fan of crap reality TV, but it honestly was like some sort of cruel social experiment that needed to be shut down but wasn't. Thanks for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one. If you enjoyed this video and want to dive even deeper into our community, consider becoming a channel member. Members get exclusive perks like early access to videos, custom emojis, shoutouts, etc. And it's a great way to support the channel so I can keep bringing you the content you love.